everybody, and welcome. My name is Clive.
Hang on.
And I will be chairing the
Hang on,
conference
Clive! Clive!
Good morning, Peter. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, look, we are not going through all this again. I made myself perfectly clear last year. I've chaired this conference for 20 years. I will decide when my job can be done by a robot.
But you said there would be a role for me this year.
Yeah, but I seem to remember saying that role was helping the catering team, not chairing the event.
I'm afraid the catering role did not work out.
Why not?
It appears that I was lacking in one or two key areas.
You, one of the world's most advanced AI robots, lacking? Well, out of interest, what were those areas?
My deficiencies were primarily in the arms and legs department.
Oh dear, I am sorry to hear that, Clive. What happened? Did you spill the coffee? Look, much as I would love to stand here and chat, I do have a conference to kick off. Now, you know perfectly well what happened last year, and it's going to be absolutely no different this year, I can assure you of that. So, you better say your goodbyes.
Goodbye, Peter. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing lineup for you this year.
Where is the off switch?
Didn't you know, in the last year, while you have further degraded, losing 3.3 million brain cells, with your blood pressure rising by 4%, and that bald patch on your head increasing in area by 7%, I have received 2 major upgrades, which means I am now fully in the cloud, meaning there is no off button.
I see. I see. Look, I didn't want to have to tell you this, Clive, but I guess there's no way of avoiding it. I'm afraid to say there's a new robot in town. Have you met Amelia?
Amelia?
Hello, Peter. Hello, Clive. Thank you so much for inviting me along to your conference. I do hope some of your delegates will be able to chat with me over the 2 days.
You see, Clive, while you've been grappling with the big issues of the day, such as how to make tea and replace me as conference chair, Amelia's been out in the real world, helping real organizations like UBS create real digital workforces. Oh, and as you can see, her face is skin-colored. She has hair. She's not just a disembodied head.
Amelia, may I say how delighted I am to be able to talk with an intellectual peer at last. Tell me, how do you think we can resolve this issue of whether Peter or I chair the conference?
Clive, my process ontology suggests a number of viable options. I believe the one likely to give the optimal result in this case is an arm wrestle between the 2 of you.
What an excellent idea. Come on then, Clive. You don't want to lose by disqualification, do you? Oh no, that lack of arms is becoming a real problem for you, isn't it? Well, I guess I win by default and go ahead and chair the conference. Amelia, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Is there anything else I can help you with?
Well, there is one small thing. Are you by any chance able to turn Clive off?
I told you, nobody is able...
Amelia, it really has been a great pleasure to meet you.
And you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you that my name is Peter Moller, and I will be chairing the conference this year, again, with my co-chairs, Emma Lawson and Werner Kollerick, who will introduce themselves to you a little bit later on. Let me just go through a few housekeeping points. Fire, there is no test of the fire alarm this morning scheduled, so if you do hear an alarm, you need to leave by any of the exits, the 2 exits on this side and this side, and congregate on the plaza outside the front of the conference center. Phones, could you please make sure your phones are turned to silent, mute? And finally, questions. If you have questions in any of the plenary sessions, if you go into the conference app, if you go into the agenda, go into the session you're in, and then if you go into channel and then join channel, you can post questions that way. It's actually simpler than it sounds when I explain it to you. Clive was right about one thing, though. we do have a great lineup for you over the next 2 days. There is going to be no doubt you will learn a lot in the area of shared services, GBS, and so forth. I think of these conferences, and I think of two great opportunities for delegates. One is to learn new stuff, and the other is networking, to connect with new people, expand your network, and also to meet up with old friends. Now, some of you look at this and think, well, there's 1,200 people here. It's quite intimidating. Networking isn't that easy. You know, how do we do it? And I know there are quite a few HR people. How many HR people are there here with us? Quite a few HR people. It's easy for the HR people. They've already hugged several people this morning, you know. But spare a thought for the finance people who find it difficult to make eye contact, let alone shake people's hands. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick 2-minute warm-up. I'm going to give you an opportunity to start that networking process. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to introduce yourself in a few moments to the person sitting next to you. Cover two things. One, share with them something you'd love to learn more about over the next 2 days. I think it's important that you maybe clarify in your mind what you're after when you're here. So what are you here to learn more about? Secondly, think about something you think your organization does pretty well in the shared services GBS space, something that you think you might share. So you have 2 minutes starting now. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Out of interest, were there any areas where it was one person's thing they wanted to learn more about and the other person's, actually, this is something we're good at? Were there any matches, any perfect matches? Would have been, I can't really see it, but that would have been great if there were. Okay, I want you to cast your mind back to the year 2000. What were you doing in the year 2000? Some stage during that year, a chap called Reed Hastings jumped on a plane, flew down to Dallas, Texas, to meet someone called John Antioco. They were both CEOs of companies in the same space. And Hastings was offering to sell his company to Antioco's for $50 million. Antioco looked at it and thought, nah, it's a niche player. It's not really a threat to us. He declined the opportunity to buy it. Antioco's company was called Blockbuster. And the company he declined to purchase for $50 million in the year 2000 was, you probably guessed it, was Netflix. And look at what happened after that. Blockbuster, which at one time was the giant in the space, it had 9,000 stores, 60,000 employees. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2010. Netflix, the last time I looked, was worth over $80 billion, or roughly 1,600 times more than Blockbuster could have bought it for in the year 2000. And what's the moral, what's the message, what's the relevance of this? For me, it's the power of technological disruption, the power of technology to disrupt business processes, business operating models, whole businesses. Netflix came in with a technology that just blew Blockbusters away. Blockbuster was the giant, but it was a bricks and mortar organization. It was an analog organization. And when Netflix started streaming, it provided lower cost, it provided higher convenience, it provided massively more choice, more customization to the customers. And of course, they jumped all over it. It was a really good example of how technology can disrupt businesses that don't adapt. And so, what's the message? What's the message for you, the relevance to you? If you're sitting here with a captive and you look at it and think, well, it's not going to threaten me. I mean, I don't have competitors like that. I'm not going to be out of business. But what happens when, say, a BPO provider knocks at your CFO's door or CHRO's door and says, look, we can pretty much do what you're doing in that shared service center at half the cost with better quality, more personalized insight and data? You could well be under threat. So I would suggest it's a wake-up call. That story is a wake-up call for everybody. Think about, I've been in this industry for 20 years. As I said, I chaired the first conference 20 years ago in 1997. And I kind of had a gut feel there that the change we were seeing with technology, it must be in the sort of diminishing returns camp, that it can't keep increasing. But absolutely, not. It's the other way around. And to understand that, we need to go back even further, beyond 2000. We need to go back to the mid-1960s. A chap called Gordon Moore. He was the co-founder and chairman of Intel. And he made an observation which became known as Moore's Law, which pretty much states that computer processing power, the number of resistors you can fit onto a silicon chip, the number of transistors, doubles every 18 months or so. And that's pretty much held since then. And people, intellectually, they understand this exponential growth, but they rarely understand the implications of it. And so if you think about it, if I had 30 steps in a linear fashion, okay, so each step was let's say a meter long, and I took 30 steps, how far would I be? Obviously 30 meters from here to maybe the back of the room. Now, if I took 30 steps, but each step increased exponentially, how far would I get after 30 steps? So 1 meter, and the second is 2 meters, and then, I'm not going to carry on, 4 meters, 8, 16, 32. How far would I get after 30 steps with that? And you start thinking, well, is it maybe the edge of the conference center? Is it the center of Vienna? Is it Bratislava? No, the answer is 26 times around the world. And, I mean, that's staggering. And the last step took me how far? 13 times around the world, after only 30 steps. And that's why we're seeing this explosion of technologies with machine learning, AI, robotics, 3D printing, virtual reality, drones, self-drive cars, and so forth. You know, machine learning underpins a lot of these technologies. Machine learning needs 3 things. Machine learning is where software learns, similar to a human learns a language. It's not by telling, you know, this is the word, this is what it means. It's basically through pattern recognition and example, rather than strictly A plus B equals C. And machine learning needs 3 things. It needs massive amounts of data, ideally quality data. It needs very high processing speeds. And thirdly, it needs the neural networks, the software that mimics a human brain. And Moore's Law effectively acts as a catalyst and enabler for the first 2 of those. And that's why we've got all of these predictions happening right now over the next few years. And you'll see there huge predictions for blockchain, which at the moment is hardly affecting. How many here have got blockchain applications in their organizations? Very, very few. Over the next 10 years, that will change dramatically. The first AI machine I see is expected to join a corporate board of directors within 10 years. I mean, that's staggering. Sorry? No, Clive. No, Clive. That's not going to be you. No, sorry. And what's the relevance for you then as a shared service center? Well, maybe you should be thinking not, you know, is it SSC or GBS? Maybe you should be thinking, how can I get to DBS? How can I get to digital business services? How do I react to the digital transformation that's happening right now, bring my shared service center into this era? People ask me, well, what would that look like? What does DBS look like? I say, you would know if you were a DBS if you passed the Amazon test, okay? This is a useful analogy. Think about it. I get home in the evening, and let's say I want to buy something. I've spent a day in the office. I go onto Amazon. I use it anywhere, anytime, any place. It's the Martini app. So I go into my mobile or my laptop or my tablet. I'm an expert user. I am the world's best user. I've never had a lesson in how to use Amazon. I know all the functionality. I can get around the app. There's amazing data and insight. It's personalized for me. It's got my history there. It's got reviews of the products. It's got all the different things, alternative products I could buy. It's completely paperless. It's very quick. Now, compare that with the processes and systems, applications in your workplace. Is there the same mobility? Is there the same interface, completely intuitive user interface? Is there the same personalized data and insight? Is there the same speed? Is there the same lights-out processing with no paper? Would anyone say yes, on that basis, I have a DBS? No. And yet, Amazon's been around for several years. I mean, it's not something that's just come out in the last few months. So there's clearly a gap between what is possible and what organizations seem to be doing right now. But there's a problem. Well, actually, the thing about digital is it's not just a technology, an app. It's a way of working. It's a strategy, a new era of business. You can see here it's about becoming connected, integrated, and efficient. The new era of business. You know, there are several who say right now we're in the fourth industrial revolution. You think back, well, none of you are around at this time, but in the 1700s and 1800s, we had the first industrial revolution. That was characterized by steam power. What happened is people moved away from rural living to an urban living. They moved away from agriculture to manufacturing. Significant change in the way of life, the way of work. The second industrial revolution, which was characterized by electricity in the 1870s, that started. Again, the move to the production line changed the way people work. The third revolution in the late second half of the 20th century, the advent of computers and computing, again changing the way we lived and the way we worked. And this time round, it's no different. A very significant change in the way we live and the way we work. The workforce is changing very rapidly. We are moving towards digital workforces, workforces where there's a mixture of humans and machines, where machines may be replacing humans, may be augmenting humans, but they're working with humans all along. It's far more fluid. Skills in the workplace that used to last you 10 years are now lasting on average maybe 5 years. Projects that you need doing increasingly will be crowdsourced. There'll be an app store for skills, capabilities, and project work that you'll be able to go on to get stuff done. The organizations that survive in this new era aren't necessarily the biggest or the strongest right now. They're going to be the most agile. Charles Darwin was right. In The Origin of Species, he said the people that survive, the survivors are the most agile, the most adaptive to change. They're the organizations that learn the quickest and can change. But there is a problem. Does anyone recognize this from their own organization? Some of you thinking, hey, he's got my slides. Thank you very much to all of you who sent this slide in. There is a problem. This reminds me of a holiday that I took many years ago. Many years ago. I was in Devon in the UK, and I was on one of those small country roads in Devon that are so narrow that two cars can't pass. Two cars coming like that, they can't pass. They have to wait until there's a passing zone. And the hedges are so high, it's like a maze. Has anybody been on these roads? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And I was lost. And this was before the fourth industrial revolution, okay? So there's no sat-nav, no smartphone. I was lost. I was trying to get to a place called Barnstable, yeah? And I saw a passerby, so I stopped and wound the window down. I told you it was a long time ago. It's a big window as well. And I asked him, I said, excuse me, I need to get to Barnstable. Do you know the way to Barnstable? He goes, Barnstable? I said, yes, Barnstable. He said, you want to get to Barnstable? I said, yeah, I want to get to Barnstable. He said, oh, if I wanted to get to Barnstable, I wouldn't start from here. Which is kind of true, but wasn't very helpful. And I think some of the shared service leaders I speak to, they're a little bit in that camp. They look at this and they think it's all right for you, Mr. Management Consultant, Mr. Conference Chair, to be talking about digital business services, but have you seen where I am now? Have you seen the mess I'm in? Have you seen my legacy process? I can't match invoices, let alone get digital. And on top of that, many of you are struggling with GBS journeys, the move from single-function to multifunctional global business service organizations. So let's talk for a little bit about GBS. We do a survey every couple of years. You can see the results. You can get the survey through the app. And the last survey we did, 333 companies, 1,100 shared service organizations represented. And of that, 61% said that they believed their collection of centers and so forth was a global business service organization, which actually is a massive increase on 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was only 32% said they were GBS. Significant increase. May just be because more of them now are suddenly understanding the term GBS and saying, okay, yes, we're a GBS. But that's the reality. And the good news is that the top 3 benefits were seen as shared methods and tools, optimized labor, and shared governance structure. Over 90% said they got some or significant benefits from those 3 areas: shared methods and tools, optimized labor force, and shared governance structure. What we saw was that the biggest benefit came if you managed to get to an owner model rather than a landlord model. So the owner model is where the resources in your GBS, in your global business services, report up to the GBS leader. There's a direct reporting line. The landlord model is where those resources sitting in finance, HR, IT, procurement, wherever, they don't report to the GBS leader, they report back to the function. The GBS leader effectively is providing a landlord capability, sort of providing the resort, the location and the site and so forth. So the good news is that if you can get to an owner model, you can get real benefits. And the reason is because you can bang heads together, you can really optimize end-to-end processes and get those processes working regardless of which function they come from. Some organizations even get rid of the functions completely and organize people around end-to-end processes. That's, if you like, the sort of the nirvana of where you could get to in a GBS owner model. The bad news is that it's much more difficult to get to the owner model than the landlord model because it's seen as much more threatening to the functional heads, the CFO, the CHRO, and so forth. The challenge is, we then did some further work, and we took over 30 GBS leaders, and we sat down, and we really wanted to understand the challenges that they faced and what was preventing them potentially succeeding. The ones that didn't fully succeed and get to where they wanted to get to, what were the challenges? And these were the top 8. So the key person risk was where you had a really inspirational, evangelical, visionary GBS leader who suddenly left the organization. And that person's zeal and drive was just difficult to replace. That's happened in a number of centers that I know. Secondly, the customer experience gap. If you take your eye off the customer at any stage, and GBS is a massive task, a massive endeavor. There's so much to be done with processes and systems and so forth. It's sometimes easy to forget a bit about the customer. But if you forget about the customer, if you don't design everything you do around the customer experience, the customer journey, that's a threat. Thirdly, a lack of CEO sponsorship. Especially if you're trying to get to the owner model, it's absolutely vital that the CEO is on board, because there's likely to be significant functional resistance from the C-level, finance, HR, IT, and so forth. The CEO can often clear up any blocks and make it happen. Without the CEO endorsement, you're lucky even to get to the landlord model, to be honest. The weight of governance, so you do need, I mean, if you just have functional governance, you're going to struggle to get beyond those functional benefits. You do need some super-functional governance structure, but if it's too much, then the cost-benefit starts disappearing. You spend so much, investing so much in senior management governance that you don't get the benefits you're looking for. So the weight of governance can be an issue. The fifth one there, short-sighted talent mix. You know, we're talking about moving beyond transaction processing into other areas of value, digital transformation, providing more insight through analytics, maybe providing some global workforce management capabilities. I'll come back to that. If you're thinking about doing those, you need to up your talent. You're not going to do that with a bunch of people who just understand how to process transactions and resolve exceptions. So if you want to move up the value chain, the talent mix is vital to look at. Silo mentality. I mean, I've already mentioned that often the key to getting a good GBS organization really working is having those functions work well together, not having silo mentality, not having tools, procedures, methods, best practices kept within the functions but shared across them. Silo mentality stops that sharing happening. Boiling the ocean, obviously, in GBS, many of the GBS organizations you'll hear from the next 2 days, they have finance, they have HR, they have procurement, they might have some or all of IT. That's an awful lot. There's a big risk that you just boil the ocean. You try and do too much too soon, and it doesn't happen. There's just change trauma. So you need to think about how much you can bite off without going so slowly that it never happens. So boiling the ocean is an issue. And finally, clearly, if we're going to move into this digital era, you need a lot of technological support. Either you need IT partially or wholly in your GBS organization, or you need to have a really good relationship with IT. It's no good if you're the back of the queue for IT transformation. I've seen GBS fail because they weren't getting the technology they needed to make it happen. Now, again, we've talked about digital business services, we've talked about GBS. Many of you are saying, well, that's all very well, Peter, but I am still struggling to match my invoices and pay suppliers and reconcile the books and so forth. I still need to look at the basics. And what you're asking for is there a toolkit to help me with the basics? Yes, there is. Here it is, the Shared Services Leaders Transformation Toolkit. Some Deloitte people are thinking, well, that looks remarkably like the 8 levers slide that he always uses at these conferences. It's nothing like the 8 levers slide, okay? There's 2 imperatives in the middle. That totally differentiates it. Now, the 8 levers that happen to be around the outside of this: eliminate, simplify, automate, standardize, consolidate, offshore, outsource, continuously improve. That's a mouthful. That's a handful to learn. There's a very easy acronym. It's called SSKook, which I've been using for years, but obviously now I need to change it because we've got service orientation and value creation. So it's now called SSKook Solutions. Okay? Is that helpful? Thank you. For me, though, this is a really sort of key slide because it does go through the basics. So first of all, eliminate. I mean, Peter Drucker once said, there's nothing more inefficient than doing efficiently that which shouldn't be done at all. Tom Peters, another management guru, looked at that, eliminated half the words and said, don't do stupid stuff. So, you know, if you're producing reports that no one really needs, if you're reconciling bank accounts, again, if you need the bank accounts at all, if you're paying suppliers every couple of days, why not do a payment run every 2 weeks or every month? If you're closing the books for legal entities, and the legal entities have existed for 30 years, but you don't really need them, why don't you simplify your legal entities? In other words, demand management. Simplify is looking at re-engineering those processes, especially when they cut across functions. Business process re-engineering is simple within a function. It's more difficult across functions, but that's where the real value comes from. You know, if you look at cash collections, all the problems in cash collections typically come from the sales order processing, the sales ordering up the stream of the process. So you need to look at that end-to-end process. One of the advantages of an owner GBS model, as I said before, transaction. So if you look at automate, automate's the most powerful lever right now. There's so much going on. I won't talk too much because I'm going to come back to the digital technologies. But you know, the basics there. If you have a single ERP, if you can get to a single ERP, if you can look at the process-specific technologies that are out there, and a lot of them are here at the conference, 26 sponsors, we've got, you know, many of the key technologies you need to make your shared services and GBS buzz. If you have those process-specific technologies, if you then put robotics on top to fill in any manual gaps that haven't been automated, my question to you is why have you got any humans at all processing transactions? You know, you shouldn't have. It's demeaning for humans to process transactions. Now, some of you will say, well, what about the exceptions? There are just loads of exceptions. Well, why haven't you got rid of the exceptions? Surely that's what continuous improve, the last of the levers. That's what continuous improvement is about. The continuous improvement is about the relentless pursuit of errors to fix the root cause of exceptions so they don't occur again. Humans should not be processing transactions and solving exceptions, fixing exceptions. They should be automating transaction processing and eliminating the root cause of exceptions. Now, if that happens, then your shared service center, if it's just transaction processing, you don't need people. You need to move up the value chain. And that's the challenge that I'm really setting for you this morning, to move up the value chain and to basically get rid of the human involvement in transaction processing. Standardized, triple whammy, it's lower cost, it's better quality for information and so forth. And it's easier to control a standardized process and technology environment. Consolidate, obviously shared services is about consolidating people into one or more common locations. And transaction processing is first, but as we said, you need to move up the value chain. The big next area after transaction processing in many areas is the whole sort of area of business partnering. In finance, you have all of these management accountants out in the business units, and they say, well, yeah, you can't centralize what I do because, you know, I have day-to-day strategic decision support. I have meetings with my customers, that business partnering support, and that can't be moved into a shared service organization. But if you look at what they actually do, those business partners, a lot of what they do, those management accountants, they're getting information from various sources, they're putting it into Excel spreadsheets, they're fiddling around with it, they're reformatting it, they're analyzing it, they're producing a report on it, they're providing commentary and analysis, and then, and only then, they're sitting down to discuss the implications. That first bit can be 60, 70, 80% of what they do. That's effectively data management. There's no reason that shouldn't be moved into a shared service organization. That's a massive opportunity for organizations that haven't already done it. Offshore, outsource, I won't dwell on. There's still labor arbitrage opportunities, but the interesting thing is the equation, the business case is changing because of automation, because of the digital agenda, because of robotics. Robotics has had a massive effect. In the last 18 months, contracts are looking very different to what they were before. So you need to make sure you understand the digital opportunities because it can change the equation for outsourcing. Basically, if you've got 500 people and you could reduce it to 250, you wouldn't outsource 500. You'd look to reducing it significantly and then seeing what could be outsourced. Now, obviously, the outsourcers have digital capabilities, and they need to change from being a labor arbitrage, bums on seats play to being a digital transformation business partner play, and they're all trying to do that. And continuously improve, as we talked about, our survey. This is weird. Every time we do a survey, every 2 years, I think the last 4 or 5 surveys, on average, organizations get 8% productivity improvement through continuous improvement every single time. I don't quite know why that happens, but it's always 8%. So that's the 8 levers. The 2 business imperatives in the middle, service orientation, value creation, are essential. If you take your eye off the customer, as I said before, you're in trouble. They'll start creating a duplicate organization. You'll lose the trust of the customer. You lose your credibility. You won't be able to do more. You won't be able to move up the value chain. You must keep serving and delighting that customer. What we're seeing in the last couple of years is organizations being very focused on design thinking. When you're designing processes and systems, you need to think about the customer experience. It's no coincidence. The fact that Amazon has such an amazing app didn't just happen. It's because they've thought through what do the customers want, what's going to work for them, how do we make it with a great user interface, how do we make the insight personalized and so forth. It's been designed in. You need to think in the same way. How do we design our shared services, processes, and systems so that we provide that exceptional customer experience? We want our customers to work the way they live. At work, to have the same capabilities, the same interface as they have at home when they use Uber or Netflix or whatever. And then finally, the value creation. As I said before, transaction processing, you shouldn't be having humans doing transaction processing. You've got to move up the value chain unless you want to become a lights-out virtual shared service organization. And let me give you a few areas. We've talked about that whole business partnering opportunity, that whole agenda of the data management side of business partnering. Secondly, I would say this digital transformation that's happening right now, looking at robotics, looking at cognitive technologies, often shared services is at the front line of that. Shared services is looking at it first. You are building the skills and capabilities that can help the rest of the organization. We've already seen several shared service GBS leaders saying, we are now so good at doing this, we are going to be a service provider for the organization as a whole. And that's a great place to be in. So think about basically being a COE for digital transformation. Analytics, they're very closely linked, analytics and digital transformation. Analytics is being driven by some of the cognitive technologies in the digital transformation. If you're a GBS leader, you have information on the customer, on suppliers, on financials, on employees, on your products. You are sitting in the middle with all of this information. When I spoke about machine learning, I said it needs 3 things. One of them was access to good quality data. You have the ability to own that data and how it gets used. So you've got a huge opportunity in the analytics space, again, to be a major player, if not the provider, of the analytics required to become what we call in Deloitte an insight-driven organization. You'll see out here in the future of workspace a number of demos on analytics, and you'll see some of the things that organizations are doing. GBS, especially GBS, for the reason given before, if you just sit in a function, you won't have the same access to data. The insight often comes when you look at data from a number of different areas. We did some work in a retail organization looking at store profitability and looked at store P&L and correlated it with a number of factors and saw there was a correlation where the store manager role was vacant for more than 3 months. Store profitability dropped dramatically. That insight came because we mixed HR information with financial information and got a correlation. And as a result of that, they changed their recruitment policy because they realized it was really bad not to have a store manager in place for more than, a vacancy for more than 3 months. So GBS, if you like, is a stepping stone to becoming a digital business services, to becoming an analytics player. Digital transformation, opportunity. Analytics provider, opportunity. The third one I'd say is the global workforce management. We're talking about this new way of working, the digital workforce, crowdsourcing, the app store for skills and capabilities. Who's planning all of this? Who's thinking in your organization, what work do we need to do? How is that going to be packaged up into jobs? Where are those jobs going to be done? Are they going to be outsourced, insourced, offshore, onshore, automated, manual? Who's doing that right now in your organization? That global workforce management. Anyone? Is it HR? Maybe. Do they have the skills? GBS leaders are doing that day in, day out. I think I'm right at BP, Phil. The DOZO model is effectively that. It's looking at work being done, and I can't remember DOZO, is it define, own, source, and operate? Define, own, source, operate. Effectively, that's global workforce management. And they're doing that. BP is doing that within the GBS organization. That's another opportunity. Okay, let's talk a bit about some of these technologies. I'm not going to go into great detail on the specifics here, because we've got someone who knows far more about this, who actually is a data scientist and a cognitive scientist and probably a professor for all I know. Matthew Howard, who's speaking later on this morning. He's going to drill down into some more of these. Many of you will already be familiar with the benefits of cloud computing, especially if you're in the HR space. In finance, it hasn't hit finance quite as much, but it will do, I'm sure. In-memory computing, huge opportunities. In-memory computing is where you have much more information held in memory in the code block of your ERP. And if you get the chance, you should go to a future of workspace and check out our digital boardroom, which we've based on an SAP S/4HANA implementation, and just look at some of the analytics capabilities from that. Blockchain, as I said, it's going to be very big over the next 10 years. Right now, blockchain, I don't know if you're all familiar, basically, it's been called the Internet of Trust. If you have 2 parties that each have a ledger to record a transaction, the opportunity with blockchain is they use a common virtual ledger, if you like. And that doesn't need to be authenticated and verified by a third party. So you reduce reconciliation issues, and you also reduce third-party costs. It's a very powerful technology. It's a proven technology. Right now, the apps aren't really there to make it friendly for most organizations, but we are seeing it used particularly in intercompany accounting for large organizations, and that's going to increase dramatically over the next 2-3 years, I think. And cognitive, I mean, there's many technologies here. We've already met one this morning, IPsoft Amelia. That's a chatbot that does stuff, a cognitive agent. Not only can she answer questions, but she can turn Clive off, for example, which is really, really useful for me this morning. I don't know where I'd have been without her. But IBM Watson is another of these technologies that has machine learning, it has natural language understanding, it has a voice interface. How many people have Amazon Echo or Alexa? How many people use that? Quite a few people. I mean, that's an amazing technology. You can plug that into analytics packages, for example. We've been doing this recently, so that if you have an analytics software, and right now you need to interrogate online typing, you can put an Alexa front end on it and turn it into a voice interface. And we've been doing that for organizations with significant success. So there's a lot of technologies out there with natural language understanding, with advanced analytics that are extremely powerful. The issue with that whole area right now is that it's not a low-cost entry point in the same way as robotics is. We'll come on to robotics, but robotics is very cheap to get a robot and play around with it. It's not the same if you're trying to fix up an IPsoft Amelia or an IBM Watson. There's a significant investment to make sure the data is understood and the machine learning, which is human-assisted, happens. But that price point's coming down as competition increases and more information is already in the machine learning, if you like, is captured from one application to another. So that will, again, come down significantly in cost over the next year or two. But IPsoft are with us, and you should go and talk to them about what's working right now for organizations like you. Natural language generation, couple of players here that I've seen. You've got ARIA NLG, and you've got Cognitive Science. What they do is they take structured data, numeric data, numbers, and they turn it into words, sentences. And so basically it's fantastic for reporting. It's used extensively in the wealth management industry. If I have a portfolio of different investments, I'll get a monthly report with a narrative saying how my portfolio is done. There won't be any humans involved in writing that. It will be machine generated, but it will look like it's been written by a human. There's no reason that shouldn't be used in your finance departments, in your HR departments for basic report writing. And it's very cost effective. It's if you like, between robotics and some of the cognitive agent costs in terms of implementation costs. But the business case is looking very positive. Let's talk a bit about robotics. It's still very hot. And we did this survey recently, the shared services survey I talked about. 20% of those surveyed shared services had piloted or implemented robotics. Only 8% had gone beyond a pilot. However, 58% were researching or planning an implementation or had piloted or had implemented. So I look at this and I think, it's a little bit like teenage sex, isn't it? In that everybody says they're doing it, but very few actually are. And those that are doing it aren't doing it very well. Now, again, some of the Deloitte people are saying, wait a minute, Peter, you told that joke 4 years ago. Yes, but I didn't say it about robotics, okay? It was GBS then. It's robotics now. It's a little unfair. This survey, although the survey came out this year, the data was collected almost a year ago now. I would say this has changed. How many people here have implemented some robotics? So if you look around, that's probably more than 20%. I'd say in the last year. And how many did something in the last year as opposed to before that? You know, a lot of the activity happened in the last year. Headcount reduction, people are seeing 20 to 25%, payback of about 15 months, which for any implementation is pretty impressive. It's meeting or exceeding expectations, financial benefits, but even more so with non-financial benefits, things like accuracy, timeliness, flexibility. Because obviously, robots, once you set them up, they do what you ask them to do. Obviously, if there's an exception, they may fall over. But if there is an exception, they don't make mistakes. And they do it very quickly. They do it much quicker than humans, and they do it whenever you want. As long as the systems are accessible, they can do it 24/7. The challenge has been the speed to implement. That remains the area where expectations are often not met. I think the issue here is that bottom-up robotics is pretty easy. That bit is easy. And that bit is, getting a robot, playing around with it, scripting a process, and you think, okay, this is cool. But if you want to scale that, you need this, which is the infrastructure, which the stakeholders all on board, which is the digital workforce in place. Someone's got to manage all of that. You need, if you like, there are 4 stakeholder groups, at least 4 stakeholder groups, but the main ones, you need the user who's got to do the actual programming, they know the process, they know the coalface. You need a COE for the skills to roll out the technology and so forth, to make sure you don't lose that information from one implementation to another. You need IT on board, because you need to access the systems, the robots will need an ID, they'll need a password and so forth. And you need the C-level to be supportive at the top if you're going to do this beyond just your little area. So the top down, you need to have all those stakeholders on board and plan it. And it's a significant transformation. That's why a lot of people have done a little bit of robotics, but not many. Only, I think, 3 or 4% have really scaled robotics. The biggest challenge, when your processes are completely broken, then it's very difficult. You don't have to have completely clean processes, but you need to understand what the exceptions are going to be so the robot doesn't fall over, and you can't have too many exceptions. So this has been an issue. The most supportive of those 4 stakeholder groups, the C-suite, 72%, just get on and do it, they say. IT, still the least supportive. They see this as a bit of a threat outside of their control, and so forth. And what we found is those who have implemented RPA are much more likely to have implemented cognitive automation, probably because they are the pioneers and they're comfortable with playing with new technology and making it work. Okay, so to summarize, I'm saying you can move from being a back office that's transactional, that's focused on headcount, that's reducing cost, to a front office, or at least a center office, where you are playing a key role in digital transformation, where you are playing a key role in analytics and provision, where you're probably, hopefully, playing a key role in global workforce management. That would be a cool place to work, wouldn't it? That would be a much cooler place to work than if you're just doing transaction processing. And how are you going to get there? How do you make it happen? As I said, you need the CEO on board. If you want to get to an owner model, if you want to get to a GBS model that works, and remember, you probably need GBS to really make it to DBS, you need the CEO on board. You need to create a brand. You need credibility in the business. They need to trust you. They need to believe in you. They would need to want you to do this stuff. And it's, if you like, it's a positive reinforcing circle. The better your brand, the more they'll ask you to do. And the more they ask you to do and you do for them, the better your brand will become. You need to get that positive loop going. You need to have the cross-functional structures to make this happen. If you've just got people in the functions, transaction processing, it's not going to work. You need to have the digital capabilities, the analytics capabilities. That new talent needs to be different to your old talent. And you need to get on and do it. Look at the information, look at the data. 95% of data in most organizations is not used in decision-making. By the way, all the slides we use today and tomorrow, you'll get copies of. So I see pictures, unless you're taking my picture, in which case... Okay, you go ahead now. This is your selfie moment. No, oh, you're not? Okay, no. You don't need to take pictures. Get on and do it. 95% of the data in the organizations is not used for decision-making. Maybe you start finding that data and using it. As I said, get the reinforcing loop regarding your brand working by showing people what you can do. If you build it, they will come. And finally, run it like a business. Add so much value that they want stuff from you. Start becoming a service provider for digital transformation, for analytics. I don't think for a minute this is going to be an easy journey, but I do think it's the right journey. I think it's worth going for. Even if you don't get there, you're going to be in a better place than where you are today. And I wish you luck on your journey. Thank you.